Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's On the Beat with an asterisk. It's not going to be on the beat next week. It'll be up to you, the listeners, to name the show with some choices picked by us and others. Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity are our sponsors. That's Adam Smith, Evan Rogers, Jeremiah Holloway. Another edition, guys, and we're doing this. We're going big on UNC's defensive line. And the debate tonight is going to be, is this defensive line actually legit, or is it a product of playing lesser competition, though Minnesota probably doesn't fall in that category. So what we're going to do, we're going to start it out. First of all, I'm going to run a banner at the bottom at some point. The two choices for you folks watching this, and for you guys too, Adam, Jeremiah, and Evan, is we got in focus and press coverage. If there's some diehard somebody wanting to have a third name in there to vote on this week, you need to come up with it. But it's going to be in focus or press coverage. Those will be the two options with a third up to you guys. Mack Brown talked about the defensive line, talked about the goal line stands they had to endure against North Carolina Central on Saturday. Let's see what Mack had to say about that.
It's another great job in goal line stand. They started at the 1 yard line, had 6 plays, and had to kick a field goal. And that's 2 weeks in a row now that we've played great goal line defense. And as I said after the game, goal line defense is hard to practice because it's just a lot of bodies that are going full speed. And when you can get that much work in a game and be successful with it, because our defensive line's really knocking the offensive line back on the goal line, and it's just tremendous. And Geoff will elaborate more on who made plays at that time.
All right, of course, Geoff Collins follows up Mack. For everybody that doesn't understand how the Mondays work, we get Mack Brown for 45 minutes-ish, and we know from doing this for a long time, Mack is not constrained by time on those days. Then we get Chip Lindsey. He comes in and talks about the offense, and then Geoff Collins basically entertains us for another 15 to 20 minutes. Great guy to talk to. Here's a little back and forth on his thoughts on that defensive line and on those goal line stands as well.
The big emphasis yesterday in the unit meeting was we make a play, celebrate with your teammates. You know, we had a great goal line stand, and then we get the unsportsmanlike, so we have to have another great goal line stand. And I think one was plenty, but we were forced to go ahead and have two, but we went over that in detail. There was a lot of good things that we showed yesterday in the unit meeting, but every one of the penalties was pointed out with the big red dot circling the guys. So, you know, we don't shy away from addressing it, and the guys know we love them, we care about them. We just want to play a great brand of football and show poise and class and all those kind of things pre and post snap. I think just the foundations, the fundamentals, the techniques, the base principles that we have within the scheme of our defense, and just applying them to whatever call has been beneficial to us. And, you know, I think we got maybe 3 goal line sessions during preseason camp, but I think we go 4 plays at most each time. So there might have been a total of 12 reps of preseason goal line work that were live. And then first 3 games, we've got a lot more than that. But I've just been really proud of the guys. We have a put the ball down mentality. It doesn't matter where the ball is placed. We have to get a stop. Doesn't matter if we're having to play 6 straight plays from the 2 yard line. It doesn't matter. That's where we are. We got to make the play. And I'm very proud of the guys that they have risen to those occasions, and we just got to continue to do that.
The personnel that you're using on those goal-line packages, I'm trying to remember, we could go back and look, but I think it's like Kevin Hester, Josh Harris, and Travis Shaw.
It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good.
Well, but I'm saying, like, you have those 3 in together, right?
Yeah, and then sometimes Scoob's in there. There were a bunch of guys rolling through.
Yeah, but I mean, when you go heavy, you can go heavy.
We can go heavy. Yep. And we can go super heavy if we want to. We got depth and we got dudes, which is a blessing.
Adam, I'm going to get you in since you were asking about the heavy thing. Can you, and my bad, Jeremiah, the only reason I'm pulling Adam is because he talked about heavy. I mean, that's not just a heavy package. That's like 1,200 pounds of man they can put on that defensive line. So the question is, and let's go around the horn, Jeremiah, you're after Adam. Is this legitimately a good, solid, above average ACC defensive line from what we've seen so far against the competition they've played?
Yes.
And is it okay? And then I'll shape the debate a little bit. No, you're 100% right.
I'm messing. I'm messing.
I will shape the debate. Is it how much of it is coaching? I think I'll go ahead and get my 2 cents. It's 100% coaching because it's the same dudes.
I mean, how about the astute question asking there? Whoever that countrified fellow was that was talking to Geoff Collins. Geez, I enjoyed Geoff Collins. I'm sure you guys too. I mean, he just he looks around the room. He's kind of got a twinkle in his eye. He's fun. You know, I can imagine he would be fun to play for. Demanding, but I feel like he would be fun to play for. I think the answer is yes. I mean, you know, several caveats. I don't think Charlotte is a good football team. With all due respect to Biff Poggi, I do not think. I mean, NC Central is in the FCS and the MEAC. I mean, they are an inferior opponent to what UNC is striving to be. Now, as you said, second half at Minnesota, what was it, guys? Like 15 rushing yards, I think UNC at Minnesota. When, you know, every yard was at a premium and it was a slugfest up there. I do think this is a better defensive line. I think they have been feasting a little bit. I think we're going to, you know, how's this for podcast answer? We're going to find out. You know, I think we sure are going to find out when AC are smacking heads with Pitt and Georgia Tech and FSU and Duke and everyone who's on your schedule. But I mean, it's apparent. I think, you know, in some of these moments when you see the different types of bodies they can put in there, they can go beefy and beefier and beefiest. And also, I mean, there's something to remember here is Kamen Rucker hasn't played the last 2 games, and he's arguably your best defensive player, which would make him your best defensive lineman, although we know his game is about pass rushing and stuff like this. But I think Kevin Hester, Scoob, has elevated his play. I think Josh Harris was a fantastic find in the portal for what they needed. I think Travis Shaw is playing better than he ever has, and I know everyone that's listening to my stupid voice say this has wanted that for a long time. And I think Jahvaree Ritzie's playing out of his mind. I mean, this is the best Jahvaree Ritzie has ever played. So I think you sort of start with those defensive tackles and sort of work out. I think they're playing great, but I think they've played 2 lightweights the last 2 weeks.
Jeremiah, get in here. And Adam, somebody in the chat said, can you upgrade your AOL subscription?
What am I
Evan,
doing? Is it
Evan, don't laugh like you even know what AOL is. I mean, really, you don't even know what that is. Do you know the noise that a dial-up makes? You don't even know that, man. What's a cassette tape? Anyway, Jeremiah, get in here. Back on topic. Are they legit? And I mentioned the coaching aspect of it to start with. Mm-hmm. I remember when Greg and I talked to Collins over the summer, he made a point to say we're not going to talk about, you know, he's not going to disparage the past or talk about what, but it's pretty clear that when you've got a guy like our thumbnail star of the night, Travis Shaw, who's balled out better in 3 games this season than he has in however many he's played in his college career at Carolina, it is 100% coaching and accountability. But still, are they legit, Jeremiah?
I will say this. UNC's defensive line clearly, certainly better and more versatile this year than they were last year, but I'm not going to say that they've arrived yet. And the reason I say that is because of the fact that, you know, your last 2 weeks. So if you look at the first 3 games last year, you played South Carolina, who turned out to not be a great offensive line, obviously, but that's a SEC team that did have some competitive games last year. You play App State, that's a Group of 5 team, and then you played Minnesota, and then the first 3 games this year, again Minnesota of the Big Ten, and then you play an FCS opponent, and then you play another Group of 5. So I would argue honestly that even if it's not as much as we may think, the first 3 games last year were a little bit better than this year. I will, to put things in perspective, I was running through, we'll get to the eye test as well. I was running through a few numbers. There's actually some decent similarities from the first 3 games last year to this year. So the sack total is actually the same at 10, but you have to remember they had 9 the first game, and then they went sackless, and then they got another one. They had more hurries last year, actually by a lot. So it looked like they had 48 in the first 3 last year, and they have 28 right now. Quarterback hits, it's 11-7. And then TFLs is about the same. One thing that stood out to me, though, the snaps per game, way lower right now, defensive snaps per game. So they had to play 73.3 last year in the first 3 games, and they average 61 now. Okay. So you're looking at a team that from a productivity standpoint, they're more efficient, just based on like the small sample size that we have. It's a little bit more efficient, and a lot of that is the points that Adam was making of how Ritzie's playing and how Shaw is playing, and everything like that. But, and this is probably just a personal preference, I do want to see it against the team in the ACC, and they'll certainly have their opportunities soon. I think the Minnesota game was a good indication that there is going to be some ability to carry some of that stuff over, just because that is obviously a Power 5 team that would offer some resistance on the offensive line. So I think they're trending in the right direction. I think my overall conclusion, I'm not gonna say wait on it necessarily. I'm gonna evaluate it, I think, more critically when they start to play Duke and Pitt and teams like that. But certainly improved, but I think there's still room to really show what it can do when it gets to league play.
Evan, it's your turn to jump in. I mean, looking at the comments in the chat, and I'm going to throw a couple up here as we're talking. Garrett Chapman says mainly coaching and accountability. I think accountability is probably, maybe 1C to coaching and coaching as 1A and 1B. Slagle, who's a regular here always, how do you define legit? Valid question. It's kind of like you know it when you see it, and we shall find out. And then Sean Crawley with a shout out to the AOL thing. I don't know if Evan knows what this means. Evan used to be able to call somebody if they were on the internet. It'd kick them off the internet, and they would have to dial up again. We're here all night, folks. We got young jokes all night. Evan, get in here on this defensive line. To Jeremiah's point, the numbers thus far haven't lied really, but the snap counts is what's big for me, and how they're keeping them way down, even with Rucker out the past 2 weeks, not taking up, whatever his share would be.
Let's not forget Ted Monachino's role in this conversation. I think that is a massive. We're talking about coaching and accountability. His role going from an analyst to the defensive line coach this year has clearly reaped its benefits. I'm gonna take the far end on this one. I think they're actually a lot better than last season, and I don't think it's by a close margin at all. If you go back and look at Pro Football Focus, Travis Shaw, Javari Ritzie, Kevin Hester, and Des Evans are all playing through 3 games their best seasons of their career, according to their grades. Hester actually graded out a little bit better in 2019, but that was based off 3 snaps, so no sample size there. And I think there is something to be made of who they've played against. Central FCS opponent. Charlotte's one of the worst teams in the FBS, just by eye test and even according to ESPN's FPI Power Index. But I do think Minnesota is a legit offensive line. I mean, that's an O-line that has 3 NFL draft guys on there. And it's interesting when we say wait till ACC play to really figure out how good this defensive line could be and how they fare against the ACC. So I went in and looked through 3 games at the rushing yards per game totals for the ACC teams that UNC plays against. So all 8 of their conference opponents. It's not the true indicator of how good an offensive line is entirely, because obviously you have both the run and the pass block. But I think, rushing and is more obviously offensive line dependent and can really get a good picture for how good an offensive line is. UNC plays one team in ACC play that's ranked in the top 45 in rushing yards nationally, and 5 of their conference opponents rank outside the top 90. So I get that they haven't proved it against quote unquote good competition. What is the good competition on their schedule in terms of on a national scale? I mean, is it Georgia Tech? Is it Boston College? Florida State ranks 132nd in total rushing right now. I mean, I think that this defensive line has shown that against lesser competition, it can clearly capitalize. And it's shown against Power 4, Power Conference competition that it can capitalize in the Minnesota game. And that's not something it always showed last year. I mean, let's not forget App State scored almost 40 points on this defense and ran the ball for almost 300 yards. And the ACC schedule is light in terms of just the conference as a whole. It's not just UNC's thing. I think the conference in general is taken a step back this year in terms of the middle of the conference. You still have your top end, but the middle, I think, is actually taking a step back. So I think that's something that this defensive line is going to continue to capitalize on. And you can kind of see it in that goal line stand. I mean, 5 straight plays inside the 5-yard line before the delay of game by Central pushes them back on that 3rd and goal attempt on the second time around. And it's 5 straight plays that UNC stuffs them. And it's not only UNC stuffing them, it's the players that UNC has been waiting for making the plays. So the first play is Kevin Hester does a really good job fighting off the guard, and he stuffs him at the 2-yard line. Then 3 of the next 4 plays are made by a combination of Des Evans and Travis Shaw. I mean, those are guys that have talent, that are cream of the crop, kind of guys on this roster who have not made those plays in the past, period. And they're making them this year. I mean, if you watch, I don't know if it might be the 2nd or the 3rd and goal. Watch Travis Shaw. He pushes back Central's guard, and I understand this is Central. He pushes back that guard almost 3 yards. Just manhandles him. That's not something you saw from Travis Shaw in years past. Watch Des Evans' pursuit in the run game. It's been ridiculous through the first 3 games. I mean, he's more active than I think we've ever seen him. I don't think, I mean, right now they're 14th nationally in rushing yards. I think they're going to finish top 20 in the country in rushing. But if we're talking about legit, I would say a top 40 defense, top 50 defensive line in the country. I do think they have that, and it'll continue to show up in the ACC schedule.
And about the guys making plays, and people say, well, it's just Central or it's just Charlotte or whatever. I do think Minnesota was a legit offensive line, but these guys didn't make those plays against those type teams ever until this year. And so that's definitely a step forward. I mean, you heard Collins talk about Kevin Hester. Kevin Hester's not a guy we've talked about. He's been out there. He's been just a guy until this year. I mean, that for me, watching that, it has been the thing, Adam, is how Collins and Monachino have gotten these guys kicked into gear.
It has been quite the gumbo, has it not? Am I still buffering? Am I buffering? Can everyone hear me and see me? I mean, what is?
We're looking at you through a blur. We're looking at you through the dirty window, but it's all good.
We got that fiber optic internet over here too. You know, the kind they run through the ground. It's great. I don't know what in the world's happened. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think Evan made a good point with the Monachino aspect of it all. I mean, this is a guy that's coached and won Super Bowls. You know, there was a great picture that Jim Hawkins, the legend, the infamous Jim Hawkins, got from the UNC Charlotte game where Monachino is ripping into someone and Javoy Ritzie is right there. They're both pointing to the field. They're on the sideline like, hey, you do this. And, you know, it's kind of it's a literal snapshot, an interesting snapshot into everything they've got going on. But yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I just think it starts with those defensive tackles that have just played above the level that they have reached previously. And you probably thought when Kevin Hester came back for, what is it, his 5th year, I guess, you probably thought, well, you probably weren't as jacked up about Kevin Hester coming back for his 5th year as you were Kamen Rucker or someone like that. But yeah, I mean, they're working well together. There's going to be some proving grounds coming up here. It's not going to be, after Central had that first drive that went for 75 yards. I mean, they really didn't get much to the night for the game after that. So yeah, but I think, and someone pointed out in chat too, I mean, the aggressiveness of Geoff Collins, it all, not to get political, but I mean, it's like a trickle down economics thing. Google that, young bucks.
Trickle down economics right there, buddy.
Yeah. I need a script over here. I certainly wasn't planning on saying that. But yeah, I mean, you start with that. You start with that sort of mindset, that approach. Put the ball down and we're going to play. And I think it sort of feeds throughout the group. And hey, you can get momentum here when you're playing well and everybody's feeling good. You can get that snowball going down the hill. But I'm going to have to show it over in Durham in a couple weeks. And Pitt is always nasty. I mean, when Evan was rolling through those teams, I mean, I think if you stopped right now, what was today, September 17th? I think if you stopped right now, you would probably say Boston College, Georgia Tech, and Pitt, I think, would be the best teams on UNC's schedule right now in this moment. Certainly subject to change. This is a wacky ACC. I mean, I think it's going to be totally weird. I don't know how you bet on these games, by the way. But yeah. I think I think trickle down economics is a good visual.
I do like the comment about momentum and getting confidence. And Jeremiah sort of hit on that. You got a guy like, Travis Shaw, who's had his struggles, and guys can get in their own heads. And I've had a conversation with plenty of football coaches and plenty of people. It's easy to tear guys down. The art is to build them back up. Like you rip them to shreds and then you build them back up. I remember a former basketball coach that Carolina had for 2 or 3 years that was very good at tearing guys down, but could not figure out how to build them back up to get them to play. These guys have been broken down for 3 years, and now you've got Collins and Monachino that are, have the weight behind them, especially Monachino. You want to play like Terrell Suggs? Well, I coached the dude, so I know how to tell you how he plays and what gets him, to make a ton of money. But Jeremiah, speak to the fact that they're stacking progress, no matter the competition, but progress here as they get into JMU, get into Duke and all that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a point that I really agree with. I think if you get, positive in-game reps with, whoever you're playing, and again, like, to be clear, I know you can't help who you play or the times that you play them and, things like that. We get all of that. But I will say, if you're somebody like Travis Shaw, for example, who's having the most productive season of his career, in this young season, if you see that you can be obviously effective, and obviously there's other things that he did too, like, he lost a considerable amount of weight going into the season, which I think has really helped his mobility, and it's allowed him to stay on the field. It's helped his stamina or whatever the case may be, clearly based on the snap counts that he's been getting. So you have a player like that who is starting to, really see what productivity he can attain. Jabari Ritzie is seeing the level of productivity that he can attain, and he's spoken to that a couple of times in those first 2 games. He spoke to us really about that, and obviously, like you guys have been mentioning, to get constructive criticism from Ted Monachino, who's been at the NFL level and has obviously, he spent time as an analyst, so he's not brand new to some of these guys. all that stuff, it starts to add up. And I think this defense has a degree of continuity with each other. It's a different system, but a lot of those guys, they're coming back and they know each other. And now, one thing that I thought was interesting when we were talking to them in the offseason was they have a better understanding of what each other is doing on the field. So they have a better understanding of the different assignments so like the people up front, they know what the secondary is doing. It's stuff like that, and it's to a level that they didn't previously have. I think a positive sign that you see as well, if you're looking at, well, how can this translate? I will say a good team takes care of business against teams that they're better than. And I mean, looking at it, that's something that they've done. So that's something that I think would be a takeaway if you're looking at, how can this translate? But again, it's a matter of sustaining it because obviously last year we were having some of these same conversations, and again, some different personnel and everything like that. But we did have similar conversations after the first 2 or 3 games. Well, but beyond that, really the first I'm gonna say 5 games because they did give up a decent amount to Miami, even though it's a talented offense at the time. But yes, I do think the momentum is something that we can see, particularly from those players in that front four, if you will.
Yeah, we want to take a second to talk about our sponsors in this show. That's, of course, is On the Beat with an asterisk. It's going to be either in focus press coverage or folks, you need to come up with a third choice there, and we'll vote on it this week. But Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com, sponsors of Inside Carolina for a long time. I mean, I can't even remember how long Johnny T-Shirt's been doing this. 10 plus years. They sponsor these shows. They sponsor Inside Carolina, and they're been on Franklin Street since I was at Carolina. Evan, what were you doing in 1993? Unmute yourself and tell me what you were doing in 1993.
I was living the good life of a negative 10-year-old.
Yeah, so Johnny T-Shirt's been pushing great quality products to Carolina fans since before you were even a twinkle in the eye of your wonderful folks. Sponsored by, sponsoring Johnny T-Shirt or sponsoring Inside Carolina has been a Johnny T-Shirt thing, but the biggest thing they do is the customer service and the ability to connect the Carolina fans across the board. And you get 10% off if you're an Inside Carolina premium subscriber. Our second sponsor, Congruity, Matt at congruityhr.com. If you want to make a lot of money as a small to mid-sized business, you need to go to Congruity, email Matt and tell them you need their help. You need them to help you figure out a way to push that small business like they've done with their own from local to national. Great customer service again, great technology support, everything you could possibly need. Matt at congruityhr.com. National Guys Pay the Bills will come back with some questions from the chat and final words from the beat. All right, we're back. It's what? 7:30, 8:30. Oh, we're early. 8:30. Shout out to the 150 folks in here. I'm gonna get some chat questions going, but I want to ask Evan, since you're the stats guy tonight. Slagle asks, will Carolina finish top 40 in run defense? Everybody can answer this question. I vote yes. Evan, what do you think?
I'd say yes, just because they've already got 3 data points in there that are going to bring that average down a lot. I mean, they're only 68 right now. They're on a rushing yards they're allowing per game. And again, the rushing offenses that they're going up against, at least through 3 games, 5 of them are outside the top 90 in the country. So, I mean, I don't know if there are going to be games where they give up, 150 plus rushing yards, but I do think they'll stay within that top 40 range.
Jeremiah, is Carolina a top 40 rushing defense when it's all said and done, whenever the college football season ends? At some point, is Carolina in the top 40 in rushing defense?
It's an interesting question. I'm going to say I think they can sneak in there. Kind of like similar to Evan said, the early numbers. I think they can sneak in there because I actually do think they'll do solid against JMU on Saturday when it comes to that. Just JMU's rush defense hasn't been. I mean, obviously, they have Pettaway back there, and he's had some, efficient performances. but I think just based on size, that would be another kind of buffer for them. So I think they can sneak in.
Adam, you've been around a long time. You've seen some Carolina defenses that have looked good to start the season and have not finished the season very well. We won't talk about last season's. I'll never forget after that South Carolina game. I was like, holy ish, this is going to be ridiculous. These guys are unbelievable. And then we were scraping the bottom of the barrel again to find them last year. Can Carolina pull off a 40 spot in rushing defense when this one's all said and done?
Well, they certainly can. But I'm going to say they and the tomatoes can come out. That's fine. Tomato. I mean, Evan makes a good point that they have 3 data points, and the statistics, it doesn't. They add up the same way whether you play Ohio State or whether you play Florida A&M. You know what I mean? I'm going to say, well, here, let me back off the ledge a little bit here. I will say that what is going to determine that will be the Georgia Tech game and the Boston College game. Does anyone we don't have short-term memory loss, do we? Does anyone remember what happened in Atlanta last year? Good God, what did they run for 200 and some yards in a quarter? Is that correct? Evan was down there with me. I mean, it was,
Yeah, and those same guys are still there. I mean, they've still got Haynes King at quarterback, and they've got the running back, Jamal Hayes. I mean,
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I understand November's a long time away. Will we even make it there, guys? Who knows if we'll even be alive? But, I think Castellanos and the way they play BC could be a problem for a team that's looking to stop the run. For the sake of argument, I'm going to say no. I certainly think they can pull it off, and I think they are playing great right now. But for a defense, and I understand Gene Chizik is not calling, Tim Cross is not coaching the defensive line. I fully understand. By the way, Tommy Thigpen's still coaching the linebackers. And we'll see how fresh those guys are when we get deep into the heart of ACC play. But, for a defense that I could have the numbers wrong. I was telling TA, I think they finished 116 in 2022, which was the year they played for an ACC championship. And I think they improved that to 95th in total defense last year. For a team that's recent, I don't know that we're looking at a top 40 run defense here 3 games into the season, but I certainly think the building blocks are there for this group.
All right. I guess you're still – I don't know if you're still talking or not, but you blinked out on us. We got to – we're GoFundMe, Adam Internet, GoFundMe. Or I think it's probably the router. So let's GoFund Adam a router. And I see you good now, Adam. Let's do some questions for the chat. I will ask you guys individual questions. Brian Russ asked, Jeremiah, how many sacks at the end of the season does Ritzie have? How many would Dez have? I believe Ritzie's got 5 now, and Dez has got 1. So he's, doubled his career numbers there already? But Ritzie and Evans, Jeremiah, what you got?
Well, that's such an interesting question because I feel like a lot of, and Ritzie will say this too, like a lot of his sacks are products of, Des Evans' his ability to take care of his assignment. So it's almost like, one can't happen without the other, like giving up a sack or, you know what I mean? Like giving up a sack of their own. So 3 games, he's got 5. He could probably end up with about 6.5, 7 range. I'll say like the 6.5, 7.5 range probably. So that would be, you get a few more, during conference play and stuff. And again, I'm accounting for he would have to share those with some of those other guys. It's not that, it's just he has to share them. And then Dez is at, you said 2?
He's at 1 so far.
Dez is at 1. So Dez probably ends up with 4. Cameron Rucker's going to come back at some point. It's like so it's that's the thing that makes it challenging to project. But if they ask me, so that's what I'll say.
Yep, absolutely. I think Ritzie ends up with close to 10 just because he's been at the right place at the right time.
That is
I don't know about Dez. One thing about Ritzie, and I'll say this, just interject my opinion, is the chase down tackle that he made against Central was more impressive to me than the sacks he's had, because that's a interior defensive lineman running down somebody on the edge, and that is something we haven't seen from Carolina players consistently, and so I think he'll get more sacks. Let's go. Somebody asked about injuries. I mean, Rucker, his injuries, Barlow, I think Banfield, Max talked about Banfield being warmed up last week, so you could possibly see him this week. I think that's a needed person for them. Here you go, Evan. Slagle again. Where does this team have a chance to grow the most? Is it simply quarterback or is it somewhere else? Growth, Evan.
It's the position I wrote about yesterday. It's wide receiver, which is weird to say because some of the top names in that skill room are older guys. So how much do those guys have, quote unquote, to grow? So maybe it is those younger guys stepping into bigger roles and stepping up. Point of the matter is that group, I think, has underperformed by a good bit than what people were expecting out of that room this season. That's a room that UNC opted not to go to the transfer portal in because they thought they had what they needed there. And UNC is one of 6 teams in the country that doesn't have a wide receiver with 100 yards this season. Not 100-yard games, but 100 receiving yards through 3 games. And that's an issue. I don't think this team can reach its goals or the ceiling that it has set out for itself, relying on those receivers being really good run blockers. And I understand that there are moments where some of those older guys are actually really good in the run blocking game or setting up, that screen that Copenhaver had. I think it was J.J. Jones had a really good block that sprung that open for the touchdown. But at the end of the day, receivers are there to catch the ball. And some of those older guys have had drops. Some of those older guys aren't getting the necessary separation. And that's a position that UNC has been really strong at pretty much all of MAC 2.0. You can always think of one receiver, at least one receiver in a room who has been that alpha, who's been that NFL talent. And this year, that's just been missing. And Bryson Nesbitt is kind of that half receiver, half tight end. But right now, if UNC really wants to make a run for the ACC title game or have a really successful season, however you define that, they're going to need either one of those older guys to step up or they're going to need one of those younger guys to grow up really fast, because I think we all saw in the spring when some of those older guys were out that those young guys are really talented and they're coming really fast. And you could argue that a lot of those younger guys are actually more talented than some of UNC's older receivers. That doesn't mean they're better players right now than those older guys. I mean, just the nitty-gritty parts of the game that you don't get taught in high school, that's something that maybe those younger guys are a little bit more behind on. But they're going to need that receiver room to step up big time.
Yeah, Garrett Chapman in the chat asked about wide receiver room getting involved. Nobody with 100 yards. Evan hit on that. I think that's just a product of what's going on at quarterback. Let's see, knock out a couple of these. How does Darnell Dumas ask, how does the uncertainty at quarterback affect Amarion going forward? I don't think Amarion cares. Just turn around and give me the ball and get out the way. And if you're not out of the way, I'm run over somebody. I think that's the way Amarion approaches this. Preston from Greensboro says, why is it so difficult to play backup linebackers? Campbell was a guy that never played, and he seems like a decent player. I asked that question. I'm not sure Mac liked that question about when I asked about the depth being played at corner and linebacker. But it's trust. You got to trust. You got to trust who you put out there, and you either do or you don't. And they play to win the game, so I got no beef with that. Preston always asks about level of competition. You play to win the game and all that. Adam, I'm going to give you this question here. If I can find it again. Gene Triplehorn, who is a regular. Adam, do you believe Mac when he said the plan was to play Criswell for the 3rd series no matter what? stats? Interesting question there. I tend to it coincided with some struggles from Connor Harrell, but I think, on face value, it sounds like a good plan to get Criswell some opportunities, and he ran with it. What do you think, Adam?
First off, I love Gene Triplehorn. We all know that. I mean, Gene Triplehorn is one of my people. I know it's not the real Gene Triplehorn, but we could always hope. And yes, Preston from Greensboro, I would say JMU is a must-win game. That's a little, astute analysis for you there. How about a little boots on the ground thing? I was thinking about this, TA, when Evan was talking about receivers. How about a little reporting for you? You know who Jeremiah and I saw today in the lobby of the Keenan Football Center? We saw Nate McCullum, who last we saw was getting tackled by his face at Keenan Stadium against Central. And all of his body parts seemed to be where they were supposed to be. I even dapped him up a little bit, and he seemed fine. Now, he wasn't wearing any sort of neck brace or anything like that. But I mean,
be careful on those wide receiver injury reports now, Adam. You know,
well, if you go to Inside Carolina, like the photo we used with Evan's story was like, I mean, you've seen it. I mean, it's just terrible. I mean, he's getting tackled by his damn face mask. But to answer your question, which what I'm talking about has nothing to do with the question you asked me. You know what? I do. I mean, famous last words here. I do believe Mack when he says that the plan was to play him, Jacoby Criswell, with an L, by the way, everyone in the chat, not Jacoby. Play him on the third series. Here's the thing. They obviously didn't tell us that or let on about that in any way. I mean, it's kind of crazy because we all remember Chip Lindsey about, well, you go a ways to go. He ready to play. A day or two later, they're telling him he's going in on a third series, when they play the game. I had heard that they talked when Mack met with the TV crew or whatever you call the crew that announced the game on ACC Network Extra, that he told them, which I guess this would have been Friday, that he was planning on playing on the third series. So it does sound like they had those plans. I wonder how much the start that Connor Harrell had against Charlotte and against Central freaked him out. Mack claimed that, they debated for 15 seconds whether or not they should stick Jacoby in there after Christian Hamilton recovered the muff punt. But yeah, I do believe him when he says that. I just think they played it super close to the vest with how they're going to use him.
I think it's interesting that one thing, and I think Mack said this too, and I think it's relevant to this discussion, is that these dudes aren't video game players, right? We can't just go click on coaching substitutions and change them out. They have to sort of assuage their mental side when they're coaching them, because you can't lose guys. If you start Max Johnson and you tell Connor Harrell and Criswell they're never going to play, then what's the point of going to practice? I get it. You're supposed to go. You're supposed to do your thing. So they have to coach these guys in a way of having them prepared all the time. And it's not easy when you're second and third and fourth and fifth on the depth chart. Because let's be honest, if you're working at a law firm and you're in the basement making $750 an hour while the dudes in the top floor are making millions, it's tough. Same in the football arena when you had 120 kids to get them going. So I believe him when he said that was the plan, and I understand why you don't tell people. It worked out for Criswell. I think Criswell obviously has proven that he's the man. Final thoughts here. I'm going to let the young bucks get in, Adam, and I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let Evan give me your final thoughts on this week, Carolina JMU at noon. So a breakfast tailgate in the Bowls lot with IC Live at 9 a.m. I mean, that's ridiculous. You're talking about I need an Uber to get to the Bowls lot that early and somebody to get me out of bed from Johnston County. Evan, final thoughts on this last edition of On the Beat that will be a new named show this time next week.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much that's going to come out in my preview tomorrow, but a lot of people see James Madison, or maybe Thursday. Sorry, I'm putting too much pressure on Adam for editing. I saw that face. But a lot of people see James Madison and they think of the team that was ranked as high as 18th in the AP poll last year, went 10-0 to start the year. They think of the FCS national title they won before they moved up to the ranks. And that's all good and well. Point being, at least according to James Madison's first-year head coach, Bob Chesney, it's predicted that they lost 96% of the production from last year's team to this season. I mean, they lost a ton of guys. I mean, I could go on. They lost their starting quarterback, their starting running back, their best receiver, a couple of offensive linemen, defensive linemen, their best linebacker. I mean, they lost a ton of players, and they brought in a lot of guys from the transfer portal. So it's a totally different team. And you've seen that these first 2 weeks. I mean, they played Charlotte, who I think we all know wasn't a very good team. And yes, they beat Charlotte 30-7, but that game was 9-7 at halftime. They didn't score a point in the first half against Gardner-Webb. I mean, this is a different James Madison team. So for UNC, if this is a team that going into ACC play wants to feel good about itself, or you as a fan want to feel good about this team, the spread right now, or at least it opened up at around 10.5 points. This should be a cover. I'm not saying it's going to be, and people are going to say I jinxed them when it comes back and it's a 3-point win for UNC with the last-second field goal. But there's a massive talent gap and there's a massive team gap, bigger than that people might think when you first hear the name James Madison football. So this is a game where UNC can still learn a lot about itself. I still think they need to get the quarterback thing figured out. I know they say they're planning on playing 2. I think it's best if they figure out who that one is before the game and kind of ride him out. I have my pick for who that is, and it would be Jacoby Criswell. So I think they need to get the quarterback figured out, and I think they just need to play a complete game. I mean, you still have not seen a game where you can confidently say the offense and the defense both performed at a high level. And I think part of that has to do with the quarterback stuff. And part of that is just, you've got new pieces all around, the offensive line and some new pieces on defense or people playing different positions from last season. So James Madison, if this isn't a comfortable win, I think there is some reason for concern heading into, even though I called it a soft ACC slate, it still is going to be a tick up in competition.
I don't disagree with anything you said. I think Carolina plays well on Saturday. Jeremiah, I'm going to let you close the show here. But before I give you the reins, I'm going to shout out Evan's article, your article on Connor Harrell and Criswell, and Adam's work there. Also, Greg Barnes has got a column up about Mack. It's fun. It's an interesting headline. Mack Brown's history of quarterback controversies. It's a great article from Greg Barnes. Goes all the way back to Jason Stanisiak, Mike Thomas, again, before Evan was born. Do you know who Mike Thomas is, Evan? Jesus.
Great
Jeremiah,
punter.
close us out here so I can go and wallow in my old ageness. Hold on. Darnell Dumas asked me in the chat, Percy's or Jones? Those are 2 classic hot dog places or places to get that type stuff. Darnell, about the same. I've always been a Jones guy. I love going in and sitting down, and I've never been really a Percy's guy, but I'll do both. If you're buying, I'll eat them both. So you come on and pick me up, and we can go get some. Jeremiah, close us out. Final thoughts on the week.
Welcome back, George Pettaway. It's funny, me and Adam were actually talking after the availability, and it was like, you had to do a few double takes because he changed from number 23, now he's number 6, a la LeBron James. So he first game of the season, he caught a wheel route touchdown, and he also had a rushing touchdown. Didn't have the most yardage, but he was, he scored for him. And then last week he had 84 yards rushing. So this is a player that some of those UNC defensive players are familiar with. They practiced against him. They've seen him around and everything. So he's obviously a featured part now of the JMU offense. And he is a player that we actually did hear a good amount about when he was at UNC because of the versatility that he had. But what ended up happening was you have a future NFL running back in your backfield, and obviously Tez Walker on the team at the time. It's hard to find the opportunities in the passing game or in the running game as well. And then he ended up taking the red shirt early on too. So I mean, I don't even remember. It was probably like I think after 3 or 4 games, Mack came out and said that he was going to redshirt too. So yeah, so he didn't necessarily get the opportunities at UNC. He's starting to get them now, and so far, in his own way, he's been taking advantage of them a little bit. So, but that's a familiar name that's entering Kenan Stadium on Saturday, and so I think that's one of the you know, I'm not going to say it's under the radar, but that's another, in the midst of the quarterback controversy and everything else, that's like another topic to talk about coming up this week.
That'll do it, Adam. I'm gonna get us out of here, man. The internet gremlins are coming fast and furious. You've been listening to On the Beat Live, in focus or press coverage, and one other option. We'll be voting for it on the message boards. Adam Smith, Jeremiah Holloway, Evan Rogers. Come see us in the Bowls lot, 9 a.m. Come get some mimosas and some omelets. And Evan serving as we're there doing IC Live. Shout out to everybody and all the coverage. You guys mentioned player availability, Power Equals, John Copenhaver, Stick Lane, Willie Lampkin. Everybody is available to watch on Inside Carolina's YouTube channel as well. Johnny T-shirt and Congruity, as always. Shout out to the fans that have been in here, almost 200 the whole time. As always, stay safe, folks. Appreciate it, boys.